You're watching The Citizen Report, real, in-depth American.
Welcome to The Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon. Thank you for joining me today. As always, this newscast is real, in-depth American. It's always good to be back here with you, and thank you so much for joining me. Well, today I wanted to do this report on something that is not getting nearly enough exposure in the media. Now, if we had a truly free press, I think that this would be more widely covered. Unfortunately, however, as many of you are well aware, the mainstream Mockingbird media is not really in the business to tell the truth. They give the illusion of telling the truth. They're not really in the business for it, sad to say. I'm not saying individuals in the industry aren't in it for the right reasons. I'm saying the industry as a whole is corrupt. So what I want to do for the next few minutes is talk with you about a local election. For those of you that have watched my reports for any length of time, you will know that I tend to cover things on a national, federalist kind of level. You know, I cover things having to do with, you know, the Constitution, the federal government, and yes, to a lesser degree, you know, I get into talking about, you know, certain things in certain states from time to time. But generally, on the whole, I don't usually cover local elections as a matter of course very often. But in this case, it certainly warrants an exception. Let me just say this here at the outset, that this is a report you're going to want to pay close attention to, because I've got information here that not a lot of people have. Now, if you know where to look, you will see what I'm going to share, because this is publicly accessible information, and I have to give credit where credit is due. I'm not actually the one that found all this. You just simply have to go online and click on this link, which will give you another link, like for example, a news report did talk about what I'm going to talk about, and so from there I was able to then get over to another report which had more fulsome information. So put simply, I don't like to say where I live exactly, but I think it warrants an exception here. So I actually live, now I have said I live in Tennessee, and I live in East Tennessee, actually, also the east part of Tennessee, but this is having to do with Knox County, and I actually live in Knox County. So in order to understand the politics of the state of Tennessee, you have to understand how mayor elections really work. So many states don't have this kind of system, so I need to briefly mention that city elections and county elections, though separate, when it comes to the county mayor, citizens of throughout the county, inside and outside a municipal city limits, get to vote in that county mayor election. The reverse is not true, though. So if you're outside the city limits of Knoxville, for example, as in my case, you don't get to participate in the elections of the city of Knoxville, but you do get to participate in the elections having to do with Knox County. So that brings me to what I'm going to talk about here. And let me be very clear here. I just want to say here, before I go any further, that this information, if this doesn't wake you up, I don't know what does. Everyone is so distracted right now with the war in Iran, the passing of Lindsey Graham, the late senator from U.S. senator from the state of South Carolina. You have the flock surveillance cameras. You have, just the treachery, the treason that's on full display. You have, you have it all in the news cycle. But a headline like this deserves as much, if not more, attention, and yet it's not getting nearly enough attention. Now, it's my understanding Newsmax did cover this election not long ago, so good on them for doing that. But beyond the newspaper, of all things, in Knoxville, the Knoxville News Sentinel, besides them, as far as mainstream outlets are concerned, this is not being talked about. So without further ado, let's get right into this. So First of all, you have to understand that we have a general election for the county elections coming up in August here in Tennessee, including, of course, Knox County. On the Democrat side, you have someone that is basically a socialist. And you may be thinking, oh, Jonathan, it's just the Democrats. They're just up to their shenanigans again. Really? Well, consider this. And this is just me speculating. But what if the deep state is choosing right now, with all the chaos going on, to focus on flipping blue what has been reliably a red county, I believe, for decades. At least decades. And that, at least as far as I'm aware. And yet the deep state wants to flip this, because last place you would think of this kind of thing happening is in Tennessee, right? You do have the blue, little pockets in Nashville and in Memphis, but Tennessee is a reliably red state. Well, Knox County has been a reliably red county. But with the influx of more and more people moving in from other parts of the country, you are getting to a point now where it seems like now there's more competition, there's more at stake here. So let's go to this headline from Knox News, which is short for Knoxville News Sentinel. They brand as Knox News on their website, though. Headline: Knox County Mayor candidate Bo Hawk marched in Venezuela for Nicolas Maduro. That is not an Onion. That is not the Onion headline. That is a real headline. The Democrat candidate for the mayor of Knox County was supporting, or at least marching, in an event having to do with Nicolas Maduro. Now, let me put this up in the box graphic. There we go. Let's read into this. So it says here, and I'm just going to read it right off here. Bo Hawk, the Democratic nominee for Knox County mayor, marched in Caracas in support of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in 2020, Knox News has learned. Hawk posed for photographs with other demonstrators and is quoted in an article by the Orinoco Tribune, an outlet that, quote, aims to offer a counter-narrative to mainstream media and promote alternative voices and perspectives on the region, while challenging dominant narratives about Venezuela with an anti-imperialist perspective, unquote. Hawk, 35, confirmed to Knox News he was at the Caracas demonstration, quote, I was young and dumb, unquote. He told Knox News on June 25th. He said the Orinoco Tribune misquoted him, criticizing President Donald Trump and praising Maduro's supporters. Quote, I can tell you that quote was not accurate. Those were words that were put into my mouth before it went into the Tribune, he said. Well, let's read here a little bit more here. Hawk is facing Republican Betsy Henderson, who is on the Knox County School Board in the August 6 election to replace term-limited Republican Mayor Glenn Jacobs. Hawk said he attended after people he knew in the labor movement invited him to go with them to Venezuela in 2020. His support for pro-labor causes is well known. He is a union iron worker and the president of the Knoxville Oak Ridge Central Labor Council. Well, what do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? This guy is bad news. Oh, it gets better. Stay tuned. It gets a lot better. So first of all, here's the actual article, Orinoco Tribune. Now, granted, Bo Hawk claims that he was misquoted in here. So with that disclaimer, let's get into this other article. FRSO labor delegation joins Venezuelan march defending the Bolivarian government. And this is an article dated March 12, 2020. So this is 6 years ago, folks. Now, look on the left here. I believe on the far left, that is none other than Bo Hawk. Let me just bring that a little bit closer in. Okay, a little grainy, but I digress. It says, do you want me to read this, folks? I think I will. Because people need to understand this. what is actually going on here. Over 600,000 people took to the streets in Caracas March 10, marching to support President Maduro and the Bolivarian government. The small opposition called for a march on the presidential palace, Miraflores, and held small rallies in the wealthy neighborhoods. However, huge masses of people in central Caracas marched through several working-class neighborhoods to counter the opposition's call. The gigantic march went as far as the eye could see. There were banners, trucks, and music. People were chanting, singing, and dancing. Well, folks, look at this. Look at this. I see two things already. So you have Bo Hawk, a little bit longer on the beard back then. And then, of course, it's in reverse, but you can clearly make out the words "No Trump" or "No More Trump." If I guess that's what that means. No more Trump. With the fist, that's synonymous with socialism or communism, right? Well, let's keep going. Now, this is a quote that they claim is from Bo Hawk. Quote, "I saw thousands of working people celebrating their revolution. From now on, when I hear Trump's lies about the Bolivarian revolution, I will always remember the people in the march smiling, holding up the Bolivarian flag, and fighting to defend their revolution," unquote, said Bo Hawk, a delegation participant, Teamster Union steward. So there you go again, another flashing of the socialist communism, whatever you want to call that, the symbol of solidarity. Well, there's that article. Isn't that just lovely? Now here's another article. Let's go straight to it. Fight Back News and views from the people's struggle. By the way, I just have to say, with these people in socialism, don't you find it interesting that that there's a commonality here between their movements? They call themselves the people's this, the people's that. And then you have things like actual communist countries that they claim that they're not actual. Well, some of them do support it, but I'm not saying he does. But like, for example, Communist China. They're officially called People's Republic of China. And then you have the North Korea regime. They're officially known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Just a side note wanted to make there. But let's go back to this article, this propaganda piece, I guess, if you want to call it that. Venezuela, FRSO meets National Electoral Council President by Tom Burke, dated also May 12, 2020. And you can see, I believe that is him on the very far left. Bo Hawk, who is now the Democratic mayor candidate for mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. Okay. Freedom Road Socialist Organization, FRSO, labor delegation met today with Tibisay Lucena, president of the CNE, the National Electoral Council, to discuss the upcoming elections. Lucena spoke about this election as very important in the face of U.S. aggression in the economic war. Lucena explained the electoral process in Venezuela are a result of democratic changes put forward in the 1999 Constitution after President Chavez was elected. The CNE is a new branch of government, the electoral branch, that oversees a fair and democratic process. This is in addition to the legislative, judicial, and executive branches. The fifth branch of government, as conceived by Simon Bolivar in 1826, is the moral power. And it goes on here, but so first of all, he's going to support an election of another country. I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Bo Hawk, you're an American, right? As far as I can tell, I don't know where you're really from. I've heard people say you're from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I don't know if that's true or not. If you're an American, born, natural born citizen of this country, why are you in Venezuela involved in, anything about their elections? I'm not saying, be an observer, journalists do that all the time. They go to other countries to cover things like that. But you were there as an advocate, as an activist, this pro-labor stuff. Like, what in the world were you doing there? So, there's many questions I have there. And, how is it that that's legal from the American point of view, that you're supporting, I don't know if it was classified back then, but certainly Venezuela under Maduro was certainly viewed as a enemy of the United States. So it's like, I'm pretty sure there are laws about that sort of thing, but I'm not concluding anything, but I'm just saying. Now, folks, it gets even better. If you think this is, boring or whatever, I'm about ready to make things a little bit more, shall we say, exciting here. Okay, you ready? Here we go. And actually, before I do that, wouldn't it be appropriate if I brought up the music for it? So if you'll indulge me for just a second, I would love very much to bring this up, because after all, we got to have the music going on here, right? So here we go, and I'm just going to cue it up at the same time, I think. Music first, and then I'll put it up on screen. This is Bo Hawk in a picture, and it's 100% confirmed to be him. So here we go. So this is Bo Hawk. Yeah, so there you go. So this is the Democratic candidate for mayor of Knox County. You tell me, is this American? Is this pro-American? Okay, I think I played enough of the Soviet anthem. I have to say, I don't like anything about communism, but you have to give it to the communists. They can at least make a palatable anthem, I guess. I don't know, but this is absolutely just incredible that this guy actually was pictured doing this, the fist and everything. And if it's not even bad, that's not even bad enough. He was wearing stuff that was clearly, Soviet related type of stuff. Now this is from a page called Backroom Knox, and I'm just going to read what it says. I don't know who does this page, but I pay attention to it now and then. But this is what it says. 6 years ago, Bo Hawk marched for Maduro in Venezuela. He wore the hammer and sickle. He raised his fist. He backed the socialist strongman who helped wreck one of the richest countries in South America. Now he says he was young and dumb. He also says he was misquoted. Today, that same Bo Hawk is the Democratic Party's pick for mayor of Knox County. The photos are real. They are his. So voters get to ask one simple question. What changed? He says he grew up. He has not said he rejects he has not said he rejects what he marched for. Knox County is not Venezuela. Let's keep it that way. Well, yeah, absolutely. Knox County is not Venezuela. Tennessee is not Venezuela. And yet this guy wants to be the mayor of Knox County. I'm seeing his signs up in my neighborhood. Now, not everywhere, but there's a couple of houses with his sign up. And this is the guy, this guy is literally on the record doing this type of stuff. He should not be even allowed to be on the ballot. I'm sorry. I know that sounds a little edgy there. I don't think if you're a sworn socialist, I don't think you should even be allowed to be on the ballot. I think there comes a point where you are so openly hostile to the Republican form of government, and don't confuse that with the Republican Party, but there is such a thing as the Republican form of government. In fact, as I recall, in the Constitution, just as a side note, in the Constitution, every state in the Union must have a Republican form of government. That means you can't take on forms of government that resemble other things like this, right? So now here's another thing from Backroom Knox that I thought was interesting just to throw in here. So apparently the other day, there was a community town hall, if you will, a debate between the Republican Betsy Henderson and Democrat Bo Hawk, and this is a picture of it here. Things got heated. Well, it certainly did by this account at least. Let's just read it here. Bo Hawk crowd shouts down question from Venezuelan immigrant. Last night at the debate on Vanisdale Road in Knoxville, an immigrant from Venezuela tried to ask Bo a question. Pictured in blue is the moderator. The audience member has seen firsthand what socialism does to a town, and he wanted to ask Bo about his trip there. The crowd, made up mostly of Bo supporters, shouted the question down before he could finish. The moderator, Lee Hume, pulled the mic for the crowd. Bo got the floor again. He said nothing about Venezuela. 6 years ago, Bo stood in Venezuela wearing a shirt with CCCP and a hammer and sickle on it, fist raised with a crowd. He confirmed to Knox News he was at the demonstration. His only explanation was that he was young and dumb. This is telling and what could be an example of how Hawk would address his constituents' questions if he were to be mayor. His answer, or lack thereof, is not mayor-like. It is a massive red flag for Knox County, pun intended. An immigrant who lived through socialism got shut down trying to ask something simple. Bo had another chance to address it and chose not to. Knox County voters still don't know where Bo Hawk stands on this. So far, his silence is the only answer he's given. Young and dumb doesn't cut it. In the crowd, blocking a legitimate and pertinent question from an immigrant from that country is disgusting. Amen to that. I don't know who does this page, but bravo, well said there. This guy is bad news, and if you're in Knox County, Tennessee, you need to get out there and vote. If you're not going to be in town, you make arrangements to vote absentee ballot, or you vote early voting, you vote on election day. You just do whatever it is you have to do, but do not take this for granted. Do not assume this will be another election where it just kind of almost kind of coast your way through the election once you get beyond primaries anyway. This is a critical election. I believe the deep state is trying to flip this area right now, and it's very obvious that this guy is a plant for the deep state, or at the very least, the socialist movement, which is anti-American anyway. So whether he's part of the deep state itself or not, well, who knows? But they certainly have one thing in common. The socialists in the deep state do, and that is they're anti-American. They absolutely are. Anti-American sovereignty. I guess you could say anti-common law. Individual rights, basically. Now, with that said, I am just here to say also, I don't normally take this kind of stance. I did with the presidential election, obviously with Trump, but I am here to say unequivocally, unashamedly, that I am offering my endorsement of Betsy Henderson for county mayor. I believe that she is qualified for the job. She is currently on the school board. She stood up against mask mandates in 2020. I think she is well qualified to stand for the rights of citizens of this county. And more to that point, it is not the government's job to be the nanny of everything, right? It is the government's job to preserve or to safeguard the rights that are given by God to every individual person. I know that flies in the face of what you're taught in school and everything, and so many in the media and whatever. But you as an individual have individual God-given rights. The Constitution confirms those things. The Bible confirms those things. And Betsy Henderson, I think, is well qualified for that job. I don't think there's such thing as a perfect candidate. No one's perfect, but I think that she is well qualified to be the county mayor. And in fact, she made a pledge that she signed her name to, by the way. This is her campaign website. I thought I'd just throw this in here. No tax increase pledge. I, Betsy Henderson, pledge to the taxpayers of Knox County that I will oppose and veto any attempt to raise property taxes or increase the tax burden on our citizens. I am committed to responsible spending, efficient government, and making our community a more affordable place to live. No new taxes, no exceptions. Signed, Betsy Henderson. Date April 6, 2026. So That is from her, straight from her website there. And, she brands herself on her website, courageous conservative fighting for families. I liked her in the primaries. I voted for her in the primaries. I just, my gut was right with it, and I was not wrong. And I'm more sure about that now than I was then even. So, folks, as I wrap up, I just want to reemphasize, you have a socialist in the state of Tennessee. You have an enemy inside the gate. People need to wake up and smell the coffee, because the hour is late, and there's a lot of people that are just kind of comatose. They just pay attention to what's going on in Washington, the chaos and all of it. Meanwhile, here in a place like this that you wouldn't think of right off the bat, you certainly wouldn't think of Tennessee as where this kind of battle's taking place. You have a socialist that protested in Venezuela. You have someone like that is going to be on the ballot. And by all accounts, there's a real chance he could get it. And God help us if that happens. I am the third generation. My family's been here for generations. I am the third generation person here in Knox County. And I will tell you, I've lived in other places in my lifetime. I was not even born in Tennessee, but my family for generations is from Tennessee. You could go back generation. My family is about as Tennessee as it gets, at least as for the last 100+ years. And in Knox County, I personally constitute, at least on my mom's side of the family, third generation. I don't know if it goes back just that far on my dad's side, but certainly on both sides, I can at least say as far back as 3 generations we've been here in Knox County. So I can tell you this is a big deal. People need to wake up, and they need to get out there and vote. And I know these people, they want to say, oh, our elections don't mean anything because of all this stuff with Dominion voting and the computers, the data and stuff. I get that, but it's still not an excuse to not vote. Let me tell you why. Because even if the deep state did something they shouldn't do with the numbers, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, I'm not saying that happens here, but I'm saying if they did, wouldn't you still want to make sure the powers that be know what the true numbers actually were? Because someone knows the true numbers, okay? Would you not want that to be known? Okay? And I think that's a hard question to overcome on the negative side. So I will just say here, Knox County, it's truly this part of the country is one of the best places to live. Unfortunately, many people, the secret's gotten out, so it's not exactly it's really building up. It's so many people are moving here. But if this is to remain a good area to live, well, you're going to have to stand up for your rights a little bit and stand up for liberty and the Constitution. And if you don't, it's like what Benjamin Franklin said: a republic if you can keep it. The phrase "if you can keep it." Do I need to say anything else? If you're not going to make the basic effort to vote your conscience, then you get the government you deserve. It's just as that simple. So, on that note, I just want to remind my audience very briefly, thecitizenreport.net is where you go for the links to this newscast. You can follow me on X. Just search my first and last name, Jonathan Shannon, on x.com. And just to say here at the very end of my broadcast, I have been off the air and just very intermittent at that. I've been working through some stuff. There's been some good things happening and also some not good things happening, both in tandem. So really would appreciate your prayers. I'm working through it, but your prayers are very much needed. Prayers in Jesus' name that I persevere and pull through everything that's going on in my personal life. I don't like to really talk about my personal life in this venue, but Just to say very briefly, your prayers are very much appreciated. So on that note, God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And by the grace of God, I will see you right back here again next time, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.